Hi there, welcome to another great episode of Open Intro with myself, Joel Blake OBE. It's a pleasure to be with you once again. Today, we're talking space, we're talking telecoms, we're talking social impact and everything in between. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because it's one of those areas where you don't really get to speak to someone who's been there, done it, and is committed to helping other people to do the same. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the amazing Walt. Walt, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm fine, thank you.
Great to see you. Thanks for your time today. I know you're incredibly busy at this time, but in order to get started, let's just get straight in and tell us about you, about your journey to date, and then we'll certainly get more into the wonderful world of space.
Well, my background is I've been interested in telecom, but fascinated by space. And so I've pursued some activities in both areas. I've always been motivated by sort of sense of fairness. The monopoly that AT&T created in the United States seemed abusive and overpriced, and I challenged it along with many other entrepreneurs. And we were very successful in bringing the prices down and creating a more open telecom market. Also was certainly looked at him throughout I lived in a community in Washington, D.C., where a lot of Holocaust survivors lived, the few who survived. And so I was very motivated by their stories and the human rights issues surrounding the Holocaust, but also continuing efforts to harm people for nasty reasons, including the current situation in Gaza, of course. So I've been focused a lot of my business activities on trying to improve the world and maybe make it a bit more fair, a bit more accessible to everyone.
That's amazing. See, one of the things that we love about this podcast is really getting into the why, and you've just absolutely articulated that, amazingly, that the sense of fairness and opportunity for so many. Would you say that that would be the thing that's really sparked your business career to date, and why? Why was that so important to you?
Yeah, I really was. I mean, I should be more oriented towards money, and obviously we all need to succeed financially to live. But my motivation in starting my telecom businesses was more the anger over these abusive, arrogant monopolies that were
Yeah.
overcharging, and the amount of money that they would steal from the economy from everyone was amazing. In
Mm,
Europe, when we started a company there called Esprit, the cost to call from Europe to the United States was about $1 for most countries, and the cost to call within Europe was 60 or 70 cents. Right now, you can get on your phone with a WhatsApp or many other applications and make a free call. And the actual cost after you pay your internet bill is probably a penny or two a minute. So these
mm,
monopolies were highly abusive, charging much more than their cost because they could get away with it.
mm,
So now we have
mm.
more people with more communication, more accessibility that they can use for whatever purpose they want at a reasonable cost.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point. I mean, arguably capitalism is capitalism, right? But I think there's a point where capitalism supersedes morality and ethical practice, and I think for many people across the world, particularly in emerging economies, the ability to be connected is not just about being on the internet. It's about having fair opportunity to be a participant in the world and in the global economy. You know,
Exactly.
in your experiences, how did you see that playing out when you started to see the innovations that you were working on and working through having an impact?
Well, the comment about capitalism, I believe in capitalism, but capitalism doesn't mean monopoly. It doesn't mean rent seeking. It doesn't mean somebody gets an unfair advantage. It means people go
Mm,
out, try to add value. They charge for their time. They either whether you're a worker or an entrepreneur or company
mm,
shareholder, you've got to if you play fair, you create value and make a profit. If you just go and get a monopoly from the government, you're definitely not going to add a lot of value,
yeah.
and it's going to harm people. Um, so I've seen in the world, the U.S. and the world, the price of telecom service has come down from to pennies a call, and it
Mm.
means that everyone has more access. More people have access to phones in many areas. There are still 3 billion people in the world don't have regular
Wow.
access to internet,
Okay.
but the value and those people, as you mentioned, was they're missing out on, for example, AI. The kids in school in those
Mm,
areas don't have access to the AI and internet search tools that everyone else has.
Mm,
So they are missing something that will be very valuable to them in their future life, I think. So one of my
mm,
goals is, and the company I'm involved in is trying to close the digital divide, to bring telecommunication services at a fair price to the rest of the 3 billion people that don't have it.
and we're going to get into that because I'm so fascinated by that business and where it's going. But just on that kind of, I guess, conscious capitalism, then it strikes me that that seems to be missing a lot in our current world and our current economy. I mean, what are your thoughts on where you see the future going in terms of conscious capitalism? Do you see more leaders, more entrepreneurs thinking that way, or do you think it's going in the opposite direction?
Well, in the US, certainly, we've gone from a time when there was a pretty robust actual capitalist community where stores and operators, there were monopolies, but a majority of the business was conducted competitively and fairly. And now we've got an oligarchic system where there is virtually no middle class. People who call themselves middle class are two paychecks away from living on the street. That's not middle class.
Mm,
Middle class means you can live comfortably, you have some cushion, you can withstand some surprises, medical or other emergencies, without being a homeless person. So in
mm,
America, we certainly, just in my lifetime, gone from having a more fair, equitable system where people are paid a living wage to being abused. And certainly, that's always been the case in many South American countries where the oligarchy was in charge and there was a tiny middle class. But now we're seeing the same model in the U.S. And
mm,
people pay the politicians, the wealthy people pay politicians to do what they want, but that's not freedom, and that's not the thing. Europe has gone through cycles like that and has
yeah.
systems in place to resist that. Many of the European countries are more resilient in terms of protecting people's rights and making sure that everyone is adequately and fairly taken care of. In the rest of the world, it's certain countries look good, certain countries look bad. But I'm
Mm,
hoping that more communication, more openness about allowing people to understand what's going on will allow them to resist these tendencies towards monopolistic, oligarchic systems
mm.
because they don't create wealth. Everybody gets wealthier under a free market, truly free
Okay.
market system.
Yeah.
Um,
And so for the 3 billion that are unbanked, what do you see as the opportunity, and how can communication really unleash the potential in those areas where the 3 billion people are?
Yeah. I mean, in some of these countries, unbanked, it's simply they don't have ID. I mean, you have countries in the world where population are not adequately identified. The government doesn't even know who is living there to grant
Mm,
them access to social services, government services, and to walk into a bank and open an
mm,
account. In other cases, it's an education problem. And in other cases, it's the people have so little resource that a bank account wouldn't make sense, which is not
mm.
a good situation at all. So I guess the solution is to create a level of trust by using fair and equitable systems and giving people a full opportunity um, to hope that things do get better.
I remember when we were talking before the podcast, and I know you mentioned about education and talent, and the fact that there's so much opportunity for talent to be unlocked. Do you mind to just maybe talk a little bit of that? Because I found that really fascinating when we were
Well,
speaking.
it's interesting. In different parts of the world, we have America's a very wealthy country, but not a high, and we have some brilliant people here. We have, what, 330 million people in America, so maybe more. But there are also a large pools of ignorance, and um, it's, you know,
Mm,
in other countries, we have much higher literacy rate than the U.S., but don't have
mm,
the financial resources to take advantage of some of the opportunities. So it's by giving people in the places where they've chosen to be educated and literate a little more resource, a little more opportunity, the world could become much more prosperous, I think.
yeah, and I think that's what I found really impressive about your story, because you've taken that passion, that drive, and that purpose, but you've also delivered on that commercially. And you had two separate unicorn businesses you've been involved in, How did that feel being on that journey with that
Well,
purpose in mind?
both those companies were actually challenging large dinosaur monopolies. In the U.S., we were challenging AT&T, and T, and we certainly weren't the only company that were challenging AT&T. There were maybe 300 or 400 entrepreneurs in the U.S. and together, working together and competing with each other. Actually, we
Okay.
reduced AT&T's power very substantially and dropped the price of telecom by a huge amount.
Mm,
And well, that's good. Now, when we went to Europe, we were looking at these entrenched monopolies that had been guaranteed by law, no competition in most of the
okay.
European Union. Like Telefonica in Spain was the largest company in Spain, France Telecom, Deutsche Telekom, KPN Telecom in Holland. So when the law changed in Europe, allowing competition, we went in, and these companies were just completely unprepared for any real
Mm,
competition. Their proper response to competition is to do better, have more competitive prices. Their response was dirty tricks. They'd follow my salesman around and offer customers my custom people who our salesmen talk to would get a better rate to avoid them signing up with us. The rest of the people in that country were still paying the overpriced rates. So it was a completely discriminatory, nasty process of dirty trick called dirty tricks. A number of telecom operators did that in Europe to fight us, but ultimately it didn't work because we began publicizing the rates that our
mm,
potential customers were getting, and that was shocking to people that somebody was going to get half. Telefonica was offer half the price, lowering their
wow.
price by 50% to avoid people signing up with us was shocking, and it caused a lot of stir.
Mm,
So real competition shakes up the monopolists, and we built $1 billion company on the back of this idea of being a real competitive force in the market.
fantastic.
But so it was kind of fun. Monopolists are arrogant, kind of privileged. I mean, these companies, the people working for these companies are just workers. They don't
Mm,
really, they're just doing their job, getting paid. But the monopolies themselves are not beneficial at all. And now they've been substantially broken. The telecom market in Europe is now pretty
mm,
competitive, and everybody's getting a better deal. And now they pay less for all the calls they want, less than they would
mm.
have paid for just a single long distance call back, 20, 30 years ago.
I think that sense of inclusion is a real great benefit of breaking up those monopolies and those senses of control in those areas. And I think what we're beginning to see, if we look globally, is this sense of demographic shift that are coming from these emerging economies. That if they were given equal opportunity, they would add so much to the global economy. Telecommunications obviously is a huge draw in that. But how is that for you then translated into your current venture? And tell us a little bit more about the mission behind that.
All right. Well, mission behind that is there are 3 billion people that don't have routine access to internet. Most of those people, almost all of them, live in areas covered by satellites. So if they had more money and wanted to do that, they could go ahead and get connected to Starlink or
Mm,
Intelsat or Eutelsat or some other satellite, but it's too expensive. It doesn't make sense. I don't pay $100 per month for my internet service. I pay $38 a month for really strong internet service. So why people in those areas they could pay $100 a month or nothing for
yeah.
internet service. So we want to go in. We have a technology that's actually cheaper than satellites. The
Okay.
satellite industry has been itself is very competitive. It's the costs are low, the margins are low. Satellite operators are not making a big profit because the technology's been pushed about as far as it can go technically.
Mm,
We have a different technology. Instead of an orbital thing that has to be launched that has limited life, we have a airship, a helium filled blimp or airship that is an aircraft. It goes up to 20,000 meters, which is above where most aircraft travel, and it stays in a stationary position. There's a place around 20,000 meters all over the world where the winds are fairly benign. They don't blow that hard. So we get in that position. As the wind blows, we move against the wind and stay in exactly the same position in relation to the ground. From
mm,
there, we can see a circle 150 miles in diameter, 250 kilometers diameter is the same
mhm,
diameter. And in that 250-kilometer circle, there's 45,000 square kilometers, a lot of territory. And we look for areas that have 10 people per square kilometer or more, and there are quite a few of those all over the earth.
Absolutely.
That we to that area we bring all telecom services because we provide infrastructure. We're not selling to individual users, we're selling to telecom operators in those countries who want to open new territory, and they would love a lot of new customers, so they want to open new territory. So a mobile operator, um, fixed wireless operators, VSAT operators,
Mm.
IoT, any type of telecom service, we can provide the infrastructure to the ground at a much lower price. And our pricing is actually based on satellite pricing. So we're going to be 75% to 80% lower cost than Starlink, for example.
Wow.
Now, all the
Wow.
satellite
Okay.
companies are worried about how do you compete with Starlink? Well, the way you compete with Starlink is stop being a satellite company.
That seems fairly obvious, right?
Yeah. And so we're going to be able to offer a better quality service because we're closer to the ground. We have a better latency, we have better availability, and a lower bit error rate, the measurements of the quality of a
Mm.
network. But the main thing is individual people now will be able to sign up in an, like in an area, any country where the big city, of course, there's cell phone service, and probably people are paying anywhere from $8 to $15 a month for unlimited some unlimited service. Well, now people in those remote areas can pay the exact same amount, get the exact same quality of service that people in the cities are getting um,
Wow.
for access to the phone. But they also could get internet in their schools and hospitals and first responders, so that if somebody has an emergency at home, they can immediately reach a first responder and get
Yeah.
same kind of medical care response and care that you get other places. And the schools to be able to have now there are a lot of schools, for example, in Morocco, the royal family there arranged for every school in Morocco to get connected. And about half those schools were in areas that needed satellite. So they're paying for satellite service for those schools. Great. But if we go when we go in Morocco, which we plan to do in the future, we hope to do in the future, we'll be able to allow them to have twice or three times as much capacity in the school at a lower cost. So now there'll be
Fantastic.
more availability to the students, more feeling that they can use as much internet capacity as they need to do whatever they need to do, rather than sort of a limited resource that's metered or controlled. So we want to do that
Mm. Mm.
worldwide, and it's a simple thing. We have a technology that is lower cost and still has decent margins. So we want to bring it out there and compete in the market. And there will still be areas that are not covered by us because about 80% of the people in satellite only areas are are in about 15% of the territory. So by
Mhm.
covering that 15% of the territory in satellite only areas, we cover 80%. The other 20% still need to be covered by satellites. But now the governmental agencies and most governments in the world want to close the digital divide. They can afford to pay for satellite service for the remaining 20% and give them
Yeah,
decent
that makes
service
sense.
for satellite. Yeah. So it changes the economics so that governments can solve the digital divide problem. We provide the economic solution for 80% of the people. They can
Mhm.
provide the solution, a universal service solution for the remaining people in the satellite areas.
I think that's really commendable. I mean, even just looking at the news this week, in terms of the unfortunate earthquake in Afghanistan and the individuals there who suffered because of the remoteness of where that took place.
Yeah.
Imagine being able to leverage technology like yours to be able to get those responders in earlier in those remote locations. It would have been
Absolutely,
phenomenal.
communication can be a big factor. Now, for example, and right now in Indonesia, there's some huge demonstrations against the government there, corruption and oligarchy type things.
Mm.
And what's happening is the major news organizations in Indonesia have been warned not to cover these stories, and they have
Wow.
backed down. There is the major news organization in Indonesia. Many of them are not going out there with their cameras and covering these massive demonstrations, huge.
Mm.
And
Mm.
yet, everybody in the crowd has one of these. And so the stories are getting out and they're there and they're available. And
Mm.
it is changing the situation. In the past in Indonesia, they were able to squelch the message. The world didn't know, the rest of the citizens didn't know. Not possible anymore. Everybody has a camera. And so the government is having to respond, and people are learning what's going on in that situation.
And I think that's a really good point, because everyone's a news reporter, quote unquote, now because of the power of mobile. Um, even just thinking back in the US, we had Hurricane Katrina, and even the earthquakes in Asian years, in Haiti years before, etc. There's so many instances where we needed to get news out fast to save or to support people, and it took a while before the type of support that was needed could be given. Not to mention the fact that the next generation of young people, particularly in the emerging economies and emerging countries, they're already digitally first. They may not have all the resources and tools, but they're already aware of the power of being digitally first. So I think there's a real great opportunity for you to really help at such a broad scale in many different areas.
Well, yeah, I mean, just this everybody has a camera idea. Look at
Mm.
social justice now. All of a sudden, in the U.S., the police have been notorious about harming people and claiming those people were resisting arrest or doing something wrong. And now, with all the cameras out there, it's harder to get away with that. When they murder somebody on camera, they can't really say when 10 police are sitting on top of somebody that they're resisting arrest.
Mm.
It creates a
But
bit more social justice in authoritarian regions like the
absolutely.
US.
I think we as a human race, we often take communication for granted in the sense that we expect to be able to speak to whomever, communicate with whomever. And we forget that there are so many people, as you say, 3 billion people, probably plus that, who don't have the basic tools and opportunity to even have a first conversation outside of those whom are in their immediate vicinity
Yeah.
because they're not connected. So I think, there's so much opportunity for what you're doing.
Well, there's common people don't realize they have common problems.
Mm, yeah. And I think one of the interesting things about your journey as well is that it's also tied into your fascination with space. And, why, what is it that space does for you or did for you? Why did it intrigue you?
Well, there's a concept that came out of the SEDS, Students for some student at some kind of I forget what it stands for. It was a
Mm,
student space promotion organization at various colleges and
mm,
universities. It was a club for people interested in space. They came up with the idea of the space generation. People who had been born after a human had gone to space and taken a picture of the Earth. And the
mm.
Earth looks awful small compared when you put it in the background of space, and you realize there are no lines drawn on there are no lines drawn on the Earth for the maps.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And a fellow named Frank White recently wrote a book called The Overview Effect, which it describes the same concept that people
Mm,
going to space get this. Many of them come away with this different viewpoint of Earth after seeing it
mm,
from space. But we can all see the Earth from space, photos and visual information. It's real. And realize that the Earth is a single unity. Every human on Earth is closely related. We're all cousins in a way.
mm,
And that changes the viewpoint in looking at the ways to do a lot of things. 100 years ago, there was an excuse for people to have different viewpoints about different cultures and races. There's no longer an excuse. The
mm,
science is there, the knowledge is there. We know the Earth is a tiny entity in space, and we know everybody on the planet is the same race. So
mm,
now we have to look at solving the problems together.
mm, mm. And it's interesting. I remember just being a kid thinking about space, and you looking up and you're seeing the stars, and you just know that there's no end, or is there, in terms of space and the universe itself. But the fascination of it's a never-ending blank space made up of billions upon billions upon billions of stars and planets and whatever else out there that we don't know of.
Yeah.
That fascination from a human perspective is very intriguing, and gaining answers to that is going to be the ever-ending question, I
Yeah.
suppose. What is space?
My fascination was a lot about the idea that we need to explore. Why not explore the universe? And we, to
Mm,
some extent done that. We've been to the moon. Chinese are going back to the moon soon. But, and for example, the idea of living on Mars is an insane idea that doesn't make sense, but exploring Mars makes a lot of sense. It'll help us understand more about the origin of the universe. And people could live in space stations that were rotating to create gravity, artificial gravity, and that would be more logical than living on Mars. That space stations with humans living to explore, and there are resources in space that we can use on the planet, and maybe less costly to extract a resource from an asteroid than dig up the Earth and destroy a whole area of the Earth through mining. So there may be opportunities in space. I see them all the time. Just Earth observation. The satellites whizzing overhead that are looking at the Earth are able to observe how much carbon is being produced, find deposits of minerals that are located through observation, look at deforestation and other things that can help people plan better how to manage the resources. So space has already provided a lot of benefits on the planet that people aren't fully aware of. Most people.
Um, and and just on the business itself, I mean, I love the name. Where did the name come from? And so, what's next on the journey for Arialto? Then what does that
Well,
look like for you?
Bobby Alto, we've completed our core R&D. We know what we want to build. We need to build 100-meter long airships that we need that much helium or space to hold our payload at that altitude, because the higher you get, the less lift the helium provides. Uh, our payload, let's say, can provide quite a lot of capacity into a 240-kilometer circle. Um, this, we are raising money now to build a factory in the UK and begin producing the vehicles. There's no place in the UK we could rent that had enough space to float test a 100-meter vehicle, to actually have it be floating freely indoors where we could test it before we shipped it out and it became operational. So we need to build a building there. We have a location, the south of London, and we have a company that can build a very rapid construction building using canvas over steel to create an interior space for us. We're just Our biggest goal now is raising the money. In terms of other businesses, how I might be able to work with other businesses to help, I've created a number of entrepreneurial companies and helped not only private companies, but a university called International Space University. I was one of the co-founders and helped get that company operating, and now it's still doing its job as a university with a graduate program based in
Oh,
Stratford.
fantastic!
So if somebody has a company, entrepreneurial company that is doing creative, challenging things to try to that actually will improve the world, but also a good business opportunity, I'd be very happy to work with them and help them with that and provide some advice and help.
Amazing.
If somebody's ready to go public, if there's a company that's ready to go to the public market, I've done that with two companies and can be helpful in sort of advising on the pitfalls and good and bad. Sometimes going public is the best answer to get more capital to build a business, and so I'm there to provide some help if somebody wants it.
Amazing, and that's what opening show is all about. It's accepting that leaders like yourselves are incredibly busy, but you are still committed to help others and give time back. And I'm sure there will be people watching this who'd be really interested in that, particularly those who want to go public. I think scaling businesses now more than ever before is so important, and there are so many different forms of capital, as you quite rightly say. But going public is a great way of getting capital in if the timing is right. And many ambitious entrepreneurs may not understand that full journey. So someone like yourself, particularly doing it in what others may regard as probably an area that is not readily spoken about, but doing it twice, I think there's a lot of great expertise and support you can provide there. So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there's times when the market is open to public offering, times when it's closed. The window opens and everybody piles in and wants to do it, and then the window closes again. So it's not always the right time, not always the right for certain companies, but a good company that is in the right position can sometimes find more capital through public offering and more opportunity than just remaining private. It really depends on the circumstance.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, well, we've had a really great discussion. You shared your why, you shared your journey. We've talked a lot about some of the real benefits of what you're doing in the area that you're in, and and kind of there just talked about what you could offer those who come to the platform. But I just wonder if you could maybe finish off with maybe a final thought, really. What with all your experience and your social, your capital, your entrepreneurial passions.
Well, I guess I'd like to basically I'd like to say free markets and free minds create prosperity and peace. I hope that's true.
I do too. I do too. There is so much opportunity out there, but you're right. It is that free market and free minds. That's where the innovation truly lies, where people have the freedom to be the best that they can be. So I really appreciate that. So, Walter, I want to thank you for your time. I'm sure we'll speak again. I'm truly fascinated about what you're doing, and I certainly will be following the Avialto story and certainly looking at how things go for you here on Open Intro.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you much indeed. And for those who've seen this episode, please do get in contact with Walt. So to www.open-intro.com, check out his profile, get in touch, book some time with him, and I'm sure you'll be as fascinated as I am by what he's doing or what he's about to do with Avialto and so much more. So thank you very much indeed.